Hey, Paul, I watched your video, Eric Weinstein, God and the Spiritual Lives of Institutions. And I want to talk real quick about one of the ideas you get at in this video about patterns. About 6 months ago, I wrote a paper called The Resonant Structures of Reality. And this paper was essentially a hypothetical transcript of the portal. It's an imaginary episode in which I, of course, am the guest. And I'm talking about everything from out-of-body experiences to the reality of parapsychological phenomenon, the evolution of consciousness, and namely vibration, frequency, and so forth. And I'm talking about these relatively woo, sometimes metaphysical concepts through the lens of science and math as much as possible, but I'm also interfacing them with the Weinsteinian concepts of geometric unity and the disk and so forth. So I'm trying to use Eric's ideas to lure him into the spiritual realm somewhat. As your video notes, Eric may be brilliant, but sometimes his critiques and his potential solutions to these critiques fall short because he's unwilling to really take them far enough. He's not willing really to take them into the invisible and the unknown, or at least he's willing to take them into a certain kind of invisible, the mathematical invisible, but not really the spiritual. And so the paper as a whole is kind of like a bridge from materialism into spirituality, and its bottom line is ultimately that vibration is fundamental. At the core of reality, at the most fundamental substrate of it, are vibration. And we see this in everything from gravity to quantum non-locality to even the real woo law of attraction stuff. But I actually think when you start to look into these concepts, you find not only do they underlie everything, they also are increasingly being able to be understood via science and mathematics. And so the idea of co-resonance is really what I'm getting at here, that like forces attract. And this kind of should act as a through line to all of the ideas in the space being the IDW, Eric Weinstein, you, everybody is chattering about this stuff. We're not talking about co-resonance enough, but this seems to apply in both science and spirituality and seems to be kind of a marriage point between the two. And we could spend hours here talking about the research into this field. And it gets as you get into Neville Goddard and the Christian mystics and Penrose Hameroff and the holographic universe. We could rifle through the different ways in which different people are coming to the conclusion that we live in a vibrational universe and we're co-creating our own reality based on the frequency that we're outputting. And this should really be the seedling in how we're talking about these ideas. So back to institutions. So in your video, you're talking about how institutions are instantiated patterns, right? They're holding a pattern structure, and as time passes, those patterns become stale or they start to fall apart, and they're dated, but they're still controlling us and so forth. So of course the disk exists, and you ask, well, where are the patterns hosted? Eric doesn't even broach this question. You say the patterns are spiritual, which I agree, and so where's the spiritual realm? And we get into a whole philosophical discussion about that, sure. And ultimately, what is the spiritual realm? The spiritual realm is a vibratory matrix of interfering frequencies, right? And we see this in somatics quite visually. We see that vibration gets formed to pattern. So vibration, once again, is fundamental. We see it here. There's coherent, beautiful patterns, and as we see in the work of Masaru Emoto, there's also ugly, distorted patterns. They're falling out of coherence, and that's due to, in this case, heavy metal music, or whatever intention is set forth. In Emoto's work, he works with water crystals, the formation of molecules based on intention and vibration. So pattern is part and parcel to vibration. Vibration is core here. So when we're talking about patterns, we should really be talking about at more core level vibratory frequency. So as you said in the video, institutions kind of instantiate a pattern. And what I'm saying, a pattern is an initial coherent structure based on vibration. So when we talk about Apple as a company or Steve Jobs as a person, we can talk about a pattern, but also it's more potent to actually talk about from the lens of vibration. So Steve Jobs creates a certain resonance structure that is Apple. Steve Jobs dies. That resonance structure continues to vibrate, but it becomes diluted and becomes entropic. And unless new light or new coherence is let into some pattern, it starts to break. And that's what we're seeing with most of the major institutions right now that seem dated. So we talk about it in terms of institutions. We also talk about it in terms of people. The coherent vibratory framework is the thing that is giving rise to the pattern. And it's my belief that a strong frequency, and I'm not using frequency in this case in terms of like high frequency equals good. I just mean conviction, essentially. How much are you feeling that Voltron thing that you're talking about? To me, that's coherent vibratory framework. We see that in King, Gandhi, Trump, even though Trump's not operating in maybe the same moral or ethical space as someone like Gandhi, he is one of the crazy ones, right? That's what Jobs is talking about, the people who change things. Those crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And it's because they're operating at a super high coherent vibratory framework, which is giving a embodied version of pattern making. It's the same pattern. So it may not always be the right pattern for the benevolent evolution of society in a given moment, for instance, Hitler, but it is a very coherent pattern, which is to some degree um, manifesting itself and creating the world before it. And let's take the opposite of that. We have a bunch of people in the space right now. I may be one of them who's kind of intellectualizing these concepts in cyberspace, but intelligence and the workings of the brain are not the same as a vibratory framework. Look at Kanye. Look at the way Kanye acts versus the way Brett Weinstein acts. Brett Weinstein is in his ability of articulation is hundredfold sharper than Kanye. And yet at the same time, Kanye seems to be piercing through. And Kanye will much more likely be known in 200 years than Brett Weinstein. It's because he's leaving, because he has a pattern, as you said, but there's a strong vibratory framework there. His frequency is very, very high. Anyway, there's a lot to be said in this space. And I think that we should all be talking about co-resonance and co-creation and vibrations to marry all these topics. Until we do, I think we're just kind of dancing around the truth. Anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts, and I'll leave the link to the paper below here if you want to read it.